Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the ID Talk podcast. I am Fine Biometrics Communications Director Tony Bedionis.
And I'm Fine Biometrics Editor-in-Chief, Alex Perala.
Hey, Alex, how's it going today?
It is going fine for me, and I understand that you are sick.
Yes, thank you for pointing that out. If the listeners didn't pick up on it, I have been struggling with a lovely spring cold this week that I think I'm on the tail end of. I think I can say I'm starting to feel more, not worse, than I have the last couple of days. But if my voice sounds off, I apologize.
Don't apologize and don't excuse it. We are fighting the stigma here. We're fighting the stigma of having a spring cold.
You're fighting this cold with me.
Yeah, I'm fighting with you.
All right. I knew I felt not more worse today for a good reason. And it's because I got you here in the foxhole with me.
That's right. In spirit.
Do you want me to get us started? I've got a question for you.
Please shoot.
The question is, did you happen to see this iPad commercial that has pissed off, it seems, every corner of the internet this week?
I actually have not seen the full commercial. I saw that everyone was mad. It's very 2024. I saw that everyone was mad before I saw it. And then I saw like little clips of it, and I quickly came to understand why people were so mad.
Yeah.
But I haven't actually like had to watch the whole commercial. Did you see it?
I saw it, yeah. I mean, it was the same thing. I saw somebody talking about how celebrating the destruction of all things humanity is capable of creating is a despicable route for Tim Cook and Apple to take, and I was dying to see it at that point. I couldn't imagine how they managed to do that in a commercial for a new iPad. But yeah, I saw it. I mean, I get it. I get why people are upset. I also think I read that it was essentially a copy of a commercial from Nokia or something from 6 or 7 years ago. So it does feel like a very 2024 outrage kind of perfect storm thing.
Yeah, it's I don't know that I would have been angry if I just saw it without like being primed, but I'm kind of like moved that so many people find it so offensive because it's like in defense of humanity.
Yeah, and actually now I'm remembering my introduction to the outrage, and I saw that Japan was trending on Twitter, and so I looked at the tweets because I like Japan, and there was a lot of people saying, is it my Japanese sensibilities and my passion for creativity in the arts that caused me to be so outraged? And then I was like, okay, sure. And then after that, I realized, or I came to see that it wasn't just Japanese people with their Japanese tendencies or whatever it was. It's everybody everywhere.
Yeah, it's every human who cares about art, seemingly. But it is, as bad as the ad may be, it's worth taking a few minutes and talking about what it was advertising, which is Apple's new iPad, which is not a game changer at all. Outwardly, it's like, I think, flatter and has a shinier screen, something like that.
Yeah,
so your classic like iterative upgrade of an Apple device. But I think maybe part of the reason the ad was so incompetent, I'll say, is that it's hard to convey in a short ad what is actually significant about the new iPad, which is that it has this really sophisticated processor that's designed for AI. And that's something that I think a lot of people have missed. I mean, like, how do you show that? Like, no one knows what it means to run AI on their tablet yet. Really, so it's hard to like get people to understand why this matters. But I was reading
about crush a bunch of robots in that giant mechanical press. They should have just thrown a few of the robots in there and just squashed them down. Would have got the point across.
Yeah, have sort of a Terminator style thing.
Yeah.
But But yeah, we should take a little moment to like dwell on this a bit because I was writing about it for our AI update this week, which was published shortly before we started recording here, and it does seem pretty impressive. It's the M4 neural engine. So that's an upgrade from the previous M3 that was found in, I guess, last year's devices. And it has, where was it, like 38 trillion operations per second is what it's capable of performing. And apparently that's double the number that's double the number of operations that the M3 chip could do. And I was reading, just some tech analysts talking about it who know a lot about the engineering side, and they were saying that its architecture is very flexible and very power efficient. So it's kind of like ready to run really complex AI operations on a device without completely draining the battery. And that could turn out to be a really big deal. And it is kind of a preview. You and I were on a call with a really smart guy from one of the biggest vendors in biometrics the other day, and he was saying how Apple is really leaning into AI for its upcoming devices, and this is probably just a taste of that, of what's
Yeah.
going to come. And maybe by the time of Apple's, like, I think they have a June developer conference, maybe we'll get a better sense of why this is significant. But I know I'm talking a lot, but I do want to
Yep.
say one more thing about it, which is that Apple is really important to the biometrics industry. I mean, it was game changing when it launched Touch ID on the iPhone in, I think, 2013. That set off the whole mobile biometrics revolution, and then it introduced Face ID in 2017, and I think the
Yep.
following year it wound up in an iPad Pro. And it's only in iPad Pros, it only has this face scanning system in its most expensive tablets because it's such a sophisticated and expensive system. It has this fancy laser technology that projects a grid onto the user's face and gets like a 3D map. And it's hard to embed all of that in a mobile device. And so it only does it in its really expensive models. But if it's going to lean into AI this much, and all of its future tablets and phones are going to have these AI chips, they might be able to run a comparable facial recognition system without having to integrate all of that expensive hardware. So, I mean,
Yeah, that's a good point.
pure speculation, but we'll
Yeah,
see.
it's a good point. And just going back to something you said a little bit ago, a couple minutes ago, about Apple really focusing on AI now, and that's something that I think doesn't really surprise, considering the direction that some of the large language models and the Chat GPTs and the Geminis that they've been trending in the last few months. Just everybody's seen the kind of accelerated pace that they're improving at, and not to mention Google, one of Apple's main competitors. They, since the Pixel 6, which I believe was 2022, I think, they've been developing their own processors as well, the Tensor processors, and those, one of the underlining marketing points for those from Google, coming out of Google's own mouth, is their AI capabilities. And the Pixel 8, which I believe is going to be launching, at least it'll be announced soon. I think Google I/O I think it's happening in about a week, maybe 5 days. So the Tensor G3, the third generation of the Tensor chip, is coming out, and they're touting its AI capabilities. And we've seen it happen in the past, as you've said. Apple kind of waits for certain innovations or technologies or kind of developments to mature a little bit, and then throws their hat in the ring, and that pushes everybody else to kind of accelerate and improve them. And it happened with hole punch screens. It happened with fingerprint sensors. It's happened with certainly with cameras, with battery life. And now AI looks to be one of the next, if not the next major arena where you'll see the major OS and OEM companies come out and kind of compete with each other on which phone can handle AI better on device. And I think that's kind of interesting. At least it's exciting from the perspective of it's been a few years since we've had really big developments in the consumer, I don't know, tablet and smartphone markets.
Yeah.
So I'm curious to see how that goes.
Yeah, me too. I'd love a new iPhone that is actually different.
Yeah,
I
that's the
might consider
complaint.
actually buying a new one, but
Yeah, I'm not an Apple iPhone guy, unfortunately, but that's the main
to
criticism
your
that you
credit,
always hear.
to
To
your
my,
credit.
well, so says I.
Salt of the earth.
Salt of the earth. That's right.
Moving on from artificial intelligence to perhaps human foolishness.
Lack of intelligence. Yeah.
Um, I wanted to ask you about another story we were talking about this week in our coverage about Madison Square Garden's use of facial recognition. There was a legal ruling, and everyone seems to hate this James Dolan figure. And I don't like, you're a bigger sports guy than I am. I don't really follow basketball, so I think
Yeah.
you're the guy to talk to. What is going on here? Where do we start?
Okay. Well, just as a little bit of a primer, James Dolan he's a billionaire who owns Madison Square Garden Entertainment Group, which essentially they own Madison Square Garden. They own the New York Knicks, or he owns the New York Knicks. He owns the New York Rangers. Um, they own the New Rainbow City Beacon Theater. They own a bunch of venues in New York City. And yes, he's been traditionally pretty loathed in New York because the Knicks have been not quite a good franchise, good organization since he purchased them many, many years ago. Now, I should say they're currently in the second round of the NBA playoffs and they're up 2-0 on the Pacers. They play again tonight. They're playing very well. So sentiments towards Dolan might be in the more positive light than they've ever been at the moment. But that doesn't change the story behind this absolute crazy case here. And essentially, uh, the latest news is that MSG Entertainment won a lawsuit that was filed against it that alleged that they were using facial recognition in their venues in a manner that violated New York City's Biometric Identifier Information Code, the BIIC. So just quickly, the BIIC dates back to 2021, and it's there to regulate how commercial establishments in New York can collect, store, share, use customers' biometric data. And
So it's like BIPA in Illinois, it sounds
yeah,
like.
except it's a little bit more specific because it's it targets commercial establishments in quotes.
Okay.
So it's businesses that sell goods and services to the public, and it restricts how they can handle biometric data. So yes, there's consent, just like BIPA. Um, it also requires transparency. So the businesses must provide clear and conspicuous notice explaining how the data will be used, stored, protected, all those things. Um, and it places limitations on the use. And this is the important part for this case because uh, it prohibits businesses from selling, leasing, or otherwise profiting from the transaction of biometric data. So they're not allowed to make money off of it, essentially.
Mhm.
And then, of course, it also has requirements and security measures on how the data can be stored and access and blah blah blah. But the important part for this case is that it prohibits commercial um, enterprises from making money off of someone's biometric data. And as I said from the top, the judge in this case, who's actually Judge Lewis Kaplan, who you might recognize his name from the Trump versus Eugene Carroll case.
Oh,
Yeah, he was the presiding judge in this case. And he dismissed it. He said that MSG was not using facial recognition to profit. They were actually, and this is where it gets really interesting, using it to deter litigation because the plaintiffs in this lawsuit are a bunch of lawyers from law firms who are currently involved in litigation against James Dolan and MSG. And this is a little mind blowing to me, but there are currently 90-ish, 90 law firms in New York that are involved in litigations with James Dolan and MSG.
wow.
And yeah, and they appear to be using, James Dolan appears to be using the facial recognition technology at his venues to kick them out, to not let them stay for concerts that they bought their tickets for. Yeah, and this isn't even the first time that this has happened. I believe it was late 2022, there was a case with a lawyer, or perhaps more than one lawyer, being kicked out of a Rockettes show at Radio City Music Hall because they were involved in a case against Dolan and MSG. And
Yeah,
again,
I remember writing about that at the time.
yeah, I
Everyone
think
was everyone was outraged.
it's a pretty outrageous and I mean, in my opinion, hilarious headline, and relevant because again, facial recognition technology was used to identify, uh, by any real definition, an enemy of Dolan's, and they were ejected from a Christmas concert. And then it got even weirder because what happened was the New York State Liquor Authority, the SLA, got involved and they notified MSG that they were threatening to revoke their liquor licenses. And
Because of the facial recognition thing?
yeah, because, well, it's unclear. Yes, because they were kicking these lawyers out of their venues. That prompted Dolan to refer to them as, in quotes, a gangster-like government organization. And then he tried to launch his own investigation into the SLA and their involvement. He claimed that they were being spurred on by these lawyers who he had kicked out and by the law firms who he'd made enemies of now. And he claimed there was a private investigator that was hired by the SLA, or who was employed by the SLA and was hired by these lawyers who had an axe to grind, his words. And so he pursued this private investigator, and he said that he discovered that this private investigator had gotten very close to some of these lawyers, and in one case, even a shirtless photo of one of the lawyers was shared with the private investigator.
Okay.
And this is it's included, like, I've seen the photo, it's in the articles that I read researching this, and it's just a picture of, it looks like it's from the 90s, and it's just a picture of a guy in a backyard with his shirt off with Muhammad Ali.
What?
Yeah, so I guess this guy was at some sort of social gathering and Muhammad Ali was there, and so he took a photo with him, and I
With his shirt
imagine
off.
with his shirt off. Muhammad
Yeah.
Ali did not have his shirt off. Muhammad Ali was in the latter stages of his life. It looks like it's in the 90s. But I'm guessing this guy was just really proud of his picture that he has of him and Muhammad Ali, and so he was sharing it. Anyways, it just goes to show what an incredibly ridiculous scenario this is, and in my opinion, much of this is spurred on by Dolan and his ego, and he needed to go after the liquor authority, and he had to say his part, and he made enemies of quite a few lawyers at apparently 90 different law firms in New York City. And I get that a billionaire and somebody who runs businesses is always involved in litigation, just the nature of business. But I feel like Dolan, being who he is, puts a bigger target on him. And
Mhm.
the ironic thing here is that he didn't really break the biometric laws in New York City with what he was doing. He wasn't profiting off of uh, using facial recognition technology to boot these litigators out of Radio City Music Hall. He was maybe doing it out of spite, or certainly doing it out of spite. But the argument that he benefited from it, like that was, you know, the judge threw that out. Um,
I mean, I guess he pretty clearly hasn't benefited from it,
no,
given he got dragged into this lawsuit. But also, like, yeah, I guess initially I was like kind of feeling like the judge was incorrect because doesn't he indirectly benefit in some way from keeping his enemies off of? But he kicked someone out of a Christmas concert, so like,
yeah.
I don't know
I mean,
what.
look, in his ruling, Kaplan said the code does not prohibit companies from receiving any benefit, no matter how attenuated, from the sharing of biometric data. He stressed that there's a difference between a benefit and direct profit.
Mhm.
And he said, and he suggested that the data that was collected is comparable to purchasing any other service. So, and he just said that the plaintiffs claimed that deterring litigation uh, reduces Dolan and MSG's legal expenses, and
Mm,
that equates into a profit.
right.
But the judge disagrees, and he says benefit does not equal profit. And also, like you said, like being petty and pissing off a bunch of lawyers, I don't think that that deters litigation. I think that
It
maybe
invites.
that, yeah, I think maybe it draws things out, it redirects from whatever, I don't know, other reasons he was getting sued. I'm sure there's tons of reasons to sue him, but I don't know. I mean, I just feel like all we've done is you and I are no longer welcome in Madison Square Garden, and we can't go see the Rockettes this year. I know I promised you, but I'm sorry.
Yeah, I mean it's a bitter pill to swallow, but if I put myself in his shoes and I were a billionaire and I had a concert venue equipped with facial recognition and I had an enemies list,
Yeah,
like you better believe I'm not letting my
absolutely.
enemies
Yeah,
hang out and watch my show.
yeah. Let's just hope Dolan doesn't listen to the episode of ID Talk where we talked about the cameras that shoot tear gas and paintballs.
Yeah, well,
Or let's hope he does. I don't know.
that might be running afoul of some other laws, but yeah, we'll hope Dolan remains blissfully unaware of that.
And I'm sure there'll be other developments in the story. I mean, now that I've kind of discovered that James Dolan is constantly getting sued for wacky reasons that tie into facial recognition, I'm really excited to keep going to that well to see what
Yeah.
comes up. Yeah.
Oh yeah. All right. Well, going back from human idiocy to artificial intelligence, we have one more story that we want to talk about this week. It's kind of an odd one, but we were both kind of intrigued by this new. Um, I guess it's a new product. It's detailed in a research paper.
Yeah.
There's a company called Hout I believe it's pronounced Haut. They're described as an AI company for skincare.
That part
And
really stood out to me.
yeah, but I mean, why not?
Yeah.
But yeah, they have a new research paper published in Experimental Dermatology that is basically saying that they have trained an algorithm to estimate someone's age based on their hand.
Yeah.
Um, and the way that they went about this basically is they made their own face-based version as well, and they
Hmm.
just kind of put pitted the two against each other.
Yeah.
And what they found was that the hand-based model could predict somebody's age to an accuracy of within 4.7 years, and the face-based one could get within 4.1 years. Oh yeah, so
No, you had it right. Yeah,
the face one was still better, but
not much better.
their point was that it was close. And
6 months better.
yeah, but they were saying, so like neither of these results are actually very good when you think about the kinds of things that age estimation is needed for. Like there's a lot of discussion right now about gating access to online content and using age estimation for things like sales of alcohol, things like that. And 4 years plus is not going to cut it. But it is striking what they have done just for showing that you can do it with a hand and not just with a face.
Yeah, I also, like, just like you, when I saw 4.7, 4.1 years, I was not impressed. I mean, when I think about it, it is impressive because I don't think that I could accurately predict, somebody's age within 4.7 years, whatever percent of the time. I mean, if someone's 58 and I fairly satisfied that I did a decent job, but the fact that they've trained it to use hands and to look at things like, I think they said they looked at wrinkles, knuckles, and bone prominence. And I assume when using the face-based model, they also look at wrinkles and the sagging of skin around certain parts of the face, like the eye or, what have you. But you're right, for online restrictions, security reasons, gambling, porn, alcohol, whatever, 4 years is, that's not gonna,
no.
you're gonna have like 14-year-olds in certain countries able to gamble away their allowance.
Yeah. Well, as a side note, I mean, I'm kind of alarmed at how good some AI systems are. Like I use Midjourney for some things, and I saw there's a big AI person I follow on Twitter, or X if you like, Justine Moore. She's with a VC firm. I think it might be A16. But yeah, she is a really good person to follow if you're interested in what's going on in AI. And she was tweeting about this feature that Midjourney has, where you can upload a photo and you can get it to describe like the whatever it is that you uploaded. And some guy used it and just uploaded his own selfie. And the description, I found it says a photo of an ugly man with a long mustache. So like obviously I wanted to see what it would say about me. And like the way Midjourney works is that it gives you it always gives you 4 options. I took a selfie with my laptop camera and I just uploaded it. And it didn't describe me as ugly, first of all.
Thank God.
But the important thing is that every single response described me as a man in his late 30s, which is actually true. Huh. And that kind of shocked me because I'm often told that I look like quite young for my age.
You could play 20, 25.
You're too kind. But yeah, every single time, every response it gave was late 30s. And I was like, how do you?
Oh, that's cool.
What are you looking at? Like it's seeing, but this is kind of my point, which is that because it's AI, it's seeing things that normal humans are missing. And the same goes for hands, where like I'm not confident I can predict somebody's age based on looking at their hand. But because it's AI and it's looking for patterns that we can't see or aren't used to seeing, it can. And like even within 4 years, like it's better than I can do.
Yeah, exactly. And speaking of patterns, that reminds me of another story from, what was it, last week? about a study that says that facial recognition can predict political beliefs.
Yeah, that was crazy.
That's kind of crazy too, because that one talks about a scale that they created, and they used a facial recognition algorithm. I can't remember how many different photos it ran through, but the scale is, I mean, can you explain the scale? It's like -1,
Yeah, yeah. So
+1, and 0
it,
is neutral.
yeah, it rated them on con pardon me, a correlation coefficient. So it's just from like -1 to +1, and a minus one would be it's perfectly negatively correlated with something, and +1 is it's perfectly positively correlated. So, and 0 would mean there's no correlation, it has no
Yeah,
clue.
neutral. Yeah.
And so, yeah, and so what they found was that the AI system that they trained could predict somebody's political beliefs to a correlation coefficient of 0.22, which is
Right.
significant.
Yeah.
Like it can't predict every time, but like that's better than random.
Th- Didn't they
And
also use like people as a control group?
yeah, like this is an important piece of context, which is that they also had humans do the same thing, and they also could predict at basically the same level,
Yeah.
0.21.
Yeah.
And so the AI system was 0.22, but still the fact that it can do it at all is
Right.
well, pretty striking. And I kept looking when I was going through that story, I kept trying to debunk it. I was like, well, maybe they didn't account for, maybe I don't know that this is a fact, but maybe women are more likely to be liberal than men. So maybe it was,
I think that
just
is
because it's a woman, you can
yeah.
predict or whatever. But they say that they controlled for basically all of that. Like they
Yeah.
controlled for every mitigating or like they controlled for anything that might influence somebody's political views, and it still turned out that you can predict from something about somebody's face.
Yeah.
You can predict what their leanings are, which I thought was crazy. But like, yeah, you're right. That's another case of AI uh, seeing things that, well, apparently humans can see it, but I don't think most people are aware that they can see
Yeah.
um, somebody's political leanings.
Well,
Although I look at a guy sometimes and I think, I know how you vote.
yeah, I mean, the thing is, I think a lot of people probably do think they can predict someone's political leanings based on their face, but there's all these biases that come into play, right? Like you said, gender for sure, race, age, socioeconomic status, or, this is all based on superficial impressions, but it would be
Mhm.
hard to not let those creep in to your mind if you were trying to predict someone's political leanings. Whereas for AI, those things are accounted for. And yeah, it's using, I mean, I don't know. I don't know that I would understand it even if they explained what it was analyzing specifically. But yeah, it is cool. It is interesting to see that and the hand age estimation news kind of
Mhm.
close together. It
Yeah.
really does illustrate what we were talking about earlier with how quickly we're having to adjust to what AI can do and where it's headed.
Yeah. And also, like, what is biometrics really? Because this industry has traditionally been like, well, you got your face, you got your fingerprint, you got
Yeah,
your iris. Like, it's
yeah,
like these are the things. But it's always been AI underlying it. And
yeah,
now AI is kind of just at a stage where it has broken free from these categories. And it can see anything. It can see your age in your hand. It can
yeah,
see your political beliefs in your face. Like, it
yeah.
can see things we didn't know that anyone could see. So, I mean, that's fascinating.
That's cool. I like that we bookended this week's show with talk of AI and the new iPad and AI's ability to predict your age based on your hands and your political beliefs based on your face. And in the middle, we had like 10 minutes about how stupid James Dolan is and how much grief he's causing himself.
Yeah. I mean, that's a real crap sandwich.
Yeah. And
But
yeah,
I want
we're,
to say one more thing that occurred to me while we were talking about that political thing. This is just a question, not a comment. I would love for these researchers or other researchers to pick up on this political AI thing and see
Mhm.
if they can correlate political views to like signs of certain emotions in
Mm,
people's face. Like if it's like, well, there's something about your brow that shows that you're conservative, and it's
yeah,
also shows that you're like concerned or
yeah,
something, or like,
yeah,
or like it's there's something about your brow that very worried people have it and they happen to be
yeah.
mostly liberal or something like that. I would love to know
There's
like how
probably
that stuff is
a
done.
whole ton of sayings that came out of the last couple hundred years that would be scientifically proven.
Yeah.
The furrowed brow and stiff upper lip and all that stuff would just be
Yeah.
scientifically proven to be true.
Yeah. Yeah. AI is bearing out the old wisdom. And on that note, Tony, please keep a stiff upper lip as you get through the rest of this spring cold that you have.
Thank you,
Um,
Alex. I'm
and,
gonna
and thank you for navigating this discussion so ably this week, despite your cold. And for everyone listening, thank you. This has been the ID Talk podcast, and please join us again next week.
thanks everyone.